Okay, I get it. I'm telling you about all this cool equipment, but you're thinking to yourself, but I just don't have the room for it. Where am I meant to put a fully fledged studio? It all sounds great, I want to do it, but I just don't think I've got the space. But here's the thing, you don't need an awful lot of space to do this. Now I'm going to share with you the places that I do some of my recordings, and I think you're going to be fairly surprised, maybe even slightly disappointed, I'm not sure. But it will prove to you that you don't need an awful lot of space if you haven't got it. So let's cover different styles of studio, different sizes of space, and what I think the ideal setup is for each of those.
Now, one of the most common questions I get asked when people learn what I do with my filming and the fact that I do it from home is, where do you fit it? Now, they assume that because I'm doing a home studio with green screen and the effects that I do and everything, that I must have a dedicated big space for it. And this just isn't the case. Now I've got a reasonably sized house, but I've also got a big family. I've got 4 children, and then there's me and my wife. So you can imagine it can get quite chaotic at times. Now, because of this, my particular setup is something that I get to take down and put back up when I want to use it. I actually find this easier because it means that when I'm actually doing the green screen, everyone knows and they keep it that little bit more quiet. It also means I've got 2 or 3 go-to spaces in my house that I can use, depending on what else is happening in my very chaotic family. But how big are these spaces is probably what you're thinking. You want to do all this, but you just don't know if you've got the piece of space you need. Well, you'd be surprised. Now, as I said, I've got 3 different spaces I use, 2 of which are pretty much identical in size, and the other one which is slightly larger. Now, the 2 similar spaces that I use are actually only just over 6 foot wide by 6 foot deep. Now, that's hardly any space at all, right? Most people have that somewhere in their house. There was even a time where one of these spaces had some stuff in it and I would set the tripod up on top of that stuff. So the actual space I was working in was even less than that, because the camera needs to be about 7.5 foot to 10 foot away for my particular model. Now, if you've got a wider angle lens, you might not need to be that far away, or you might need to be a little bit further. It really depends on the camera in this situation, so I can't advise for everyone. But basically, see what the best distance is for the camera, but just remember, it doesn't have to be a clear space. As long as it's clear where you are, and it's clear where the camera's view is going to be, it doesn't matter what else is going on in that room or in that space. Now, the bigger space I mentioned is actually almost the same width-wise, about 6 foot, but it's actually about 11 foot as far as the depth of it. The thing is, as much as it's nice to use that space sometimes, it doesn't make any difference whatsoever to my recording. It just means that I've got more room to move around. Now, maybe you genuinely haven't even got a space 6 foot by 6 foot. Even that's no problem, because what you can do is set up your green screen inside a room opposite a doorway. Now, by opening the door and putting your camera down the hallway, you can actually record just as you would if it was a long room, and it won't restrict anything and the camera will pick everything up. And again, just go careful you don't wave your arms so far that you go out of the frame of the door. But as long as you keep that in mind, it's just like you've got a really long and wide room. Now, obviously, if you want to add more things into your green screen, or there's more than one of you, you're going to need a slightly bigger space. But it's still adequate to have that 6 foot by 6 foot space and turn that into a home studio. There's no reason why you can't do everything I've done, because at times I've actually been in a smaller space. Now, something else you need to consider with a home studio is obviously, if you are in a home, much like mine where it's quite chaotic a lot of the time, is the noise factor. So if you've got a choice between where you can do it, put it somewhere away from the main activity of the home. Or if you're lucky enough to have quiet days, it really won't matter. Another thing to mention with home studios is just check that you're not stood on a squeaky floorboard when you set it all up. You don't want to go to all that trouble, set the whole thing up, then go to record and find out that you sound like you're standing on Mickey Mouse all the time. Now, I love my home studio because it means I'm at home all the time with my family, but I can do my business as well, and that's great for me. There have been times though, especially in school holidays, things like that, where it's just got a little bit too noisy for me to get anything done. Now, my recommendation to you is search around for local breakout rooms. Now, you don't need an awful lot of space, as I've already established. So if you've got something really important that you want to get finished, you can usually hire these rooms for a few hours for a very small amount of money and actually move your studio in there for a bit. Now, if you painted a wall, then obviously you can't do this option. But if, like me, you pack it down and put it back up each time, then this is something you can do to get that extra quiet. This obviously only matters if there's a lot of noise around where you're trying to work. Another thing is if you live in a house on a busy road, try and put your home studio at the back of the building. Otherwise, you'll be spending a lot of time trying to remove the traffic noise that keeps getting picked up by your microphone. So you can see you don't need a lot of space at all to make this work. And with the cheap methods that I've shown you how to get all this equipment, you really can get this up and running for a tiny amount of money. So go out and scope out your house right now and find that little spot of land that you can claim as your home studio. You can get all the stuff set up and you can get working on this and start making some awesome videos.